I spent 35 years designing bridges that could withstand anything. At 72, I never imagined the first thing to collapse would be my own family. When my debit card was declined at a neighborhood pharmacy, my son-in-law laughed and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Looks like you can't even afford your own medicine anymore." I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "This card has never failed me. Someone made sure it would today." That moment exposed a betrayal that had been stealing my money, my home, and my family for years. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. It means more than you know. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from, your city, your state, your country? I want to know who is in this with me. A note: this story contains fictional elements woven in for storytelling purposes. Names and places are coincidental. The lesson, however, is entirely yours to keep. I have rebuilt 3 bridges in this state that are still standing today. I have signed off on load-bearing calculations that hold 18-wheel trucks doing 60 miles an hour across the Tennessee River. I once spent 11 days on site in January sleeping in a trailer because a support beam showed a hairline fracture that nobody else thought was worth worrying about. I worried about it. That is who I am. My name is Walter Doyle, and I am 72 years old, and I could not tell you why my hands were shaking on a Monday morning in October, as Kyle pulled his truck into the CVS parking lot on Maple Grove Road. "Hi, you don't have to come in with me," I said, reaching for the door handle. Kyle was already out of this truck. He had been doing this for about 2 months, offering to drive me to appointments, to the pharmacy, to the hardware store, always with a reason that sounded reasonable, and always in a way that made declining feel ungracious. He stretched his arms over his head like a man without a care in the world, and said, "It's no trouble, Walter. Brenda worries when you drive alone." I did not answer that. I had learned over the past 2 years that some of Kyle's sentences were not worth answering. They were not invitations to conversation. They were announcements. The pharmacy smelled the way all pharmacies smell: antiseptic and artificial lavender, and something underneath both that reminded me of hospitals. I had spent enough time in hospitals in the last 4 years of Carol's life that the smell still hit me somewhere behind the sternum, tight and immediate. I breathed through it and walked to the counter. The pharmacist was a young woman, maybe 26, with her dark hair pulled back and a name tag that said Melissa. She smiled the way people do when they are genuinely trying to be helpful, rather than just performing helpfulness. I appreciated that. "Hi there, picking up today?" "Walter Doyle," I said. "Blood pressure medication. Should be ready." She typed, nodded, disappeared into the back, and returned with a white paper bag. "That'll be $18.43. I pulled out my debit card, the same card I had used without incident for 11 years, and inserted it into the reader. The screen blinked red. Melissa's expression did not change, which told me she had done this 1,000 times. "Let me try running it again," she said gently. The screen blinked red a second time. That was when I heard Kyle from just over my left shoulder exhale through his nose a short, almost amused sound. "Sorry about this," he said to Melissa, his voice carrying the easy confidence of a man who has never been embarrassed in his life. "He gets confused sometimes about which card is which." My chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with my blood pressure. I turned and looked at Kyle. Not quickly. I turn the way I turn when I am inspecting something I need to assess carefully before I decide what it means. His hands were in his jacket pockets. He was smiling at Melissa the way men smile at young women when they want to seem harmless. "I am not confused about which card is which," I said. My voice came out level. Years of job sites will do that. You learn to keep your voice level when the ground underneath you is anything but. "I have used this card since 2013, It knows my name. Kyle shrugged with one shoulder. Maybe it expired. It does not expire until next March. Melissa was looking between us with the careful neutrality of someone who has learned not to take sides between customers. Would you like to try a different payment method? She asked me, and her voice was kind in a way that I was grateful for and hated needing. I reached into my wallet and pulled out two $10 bills. I had been carrying cash since Carol got sick. She had insisted on it. Always have walking around money, she used to say, tucking a folded 20 into my coat pocket before I left for site visits. In case the world gets complicated. I had laughed at her every time. I was not laughing now. Cash, I said. I paid. Melissa handed me the bag and my change and said, "Have a good day, sir." And I thanked her and turned to walk out. Kyle fell into step beside me. In the truck, he turned the radio to a sports talk station, without asking. A man on the radio was arguing about college football rankings with the particular passion of someone who has never done anything more consequential than watch other men play games. I looked out the passenger window at the red and orange maples lining Maple Grove Road. October in Knoxville is beautiful in a way that makes you ache. Carol had always loved October. She used to drag me out to walk through the park on Sutherland Avenue just to look at the leaves, and I would pretend to be annoyed, and neither of us was fooled. "You all right?" Kyle asked, not looking away from the road. "Fine," I said. He nodded and turned up the radio. When he dropped me off, I stood at the end of the driveway and watched his truck until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then I went inside, walked past the kitchen, where two coffee mugs sat on the counter. I had made two this morning out of 38 years of habit, then stood there holding both of them before pouring one down the drain, and went directly to my desk in the back room. I opened the bottom drawer and took out a small spiral notebook black cover, the kind I used to use on job sites. I had been filling it for 8 weeks. I turned to the last page, read what I had written, and picked up the phone. The number I dialed I had not called in almost 2 years. It rang twice. Then Margaret Holloway. "Margaret," I said. "It's Walter Doyle. I need to come in today." A breath. Then her voice shifted, focused, careful, ready. "How soon can you be here?" Margaret Holloway's office was on the second floor of a narrow brick building on Gay Street, half a block from the Tennessee River, and directly across from a coffee shop that had been there since before I moved to Knoxville. The building smelled like old paper and central heating and the particular quiet that settles into places where serious decisions get made without anyone raising their voice. Carol had first brought me here 20 years ago to update our wills. I had not been back since the morning after she passed, when I sat in that same chair and signed documents I could not fully read because my eyes kept blurring. Margaret was standing when I walked in, which told me she had taken my call seriously. She was 58 years old, built like a woman who had won arguments by being the most prepared person in the room for 30 years, and her expression when she saw my face said she already suspected this was not a routine visit. "Walter." She extended her hand and shook mine firmly. "Sit down. Talk to me." I sat. I placed the black notebook on the edge of her desk between us. She looked at it, but did not touch it yet. "This morning," I said, "my debit card was declined at CVS on Maple Grove Road. Twice, in front of my son-in-law and the pharmacist." Margaret's eyes stayed on my face. "Go on." "Kyle, my daughter Brenda's husband, was standing beside me when it happened. He told the pharmacist I get confused about which card is which." My jaw tightened when I said it the way it had been tightening every time I replayed that moment since I got home. "I have used that card without a single problem for 11 years, Margaret." "And you believe this was not a technical error?" "I believe," I said carefully, That someone made a decision I was not consulted about. Regarding my own account, she nodded once slowly. Then she pulled the notebook toward her and opened it to the first page. She read the way I had always admired in her, completely still, nothing moving except her eyes. One finger trailing down the columns of figures I had written in my careful engineer's hand. She turned page after page without comment. When she reached the end, she closed the cover and set it down and looked at me with an expression I recognized as concern that had not yet become alarm, but was working its way there. "Drew, how long?" she asked. 8 weeks of documentation, I said. But the activity I was tracking goes back 18 months. Tell me about your accounts. She reached for a legal pad. All of them. Everything you know. I went through them one by one. The joint household checking account, Carol and I had opened it together in 1991, and after she passed, I had kept it because changing bank accounts felt at the time like one loss too many. The joint savings account, mostly property taxes and emergency reserves, sitting around $40,000. My pension from 35 years with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, deposited monthly into an individual account in my name alone. My brokerage account, also individual. And the house on Sutherland Court in West Hills, paid off in 2019, deed, in my name, a structure I had personally designed and helped build with my own hands over the course of 2 years before Carol and I moved in. Margaret wrote steadily. When I finished, she set her pen down and tapped the legal pad twice with her index finger. "Walter, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it exactly as it is, not as you wish it were." My stomach dropped the way it does when an inspector finds something you suspected but hoped was not there. "Go ahead." Has Brenda ever had authorized access to any of your individual accounts? Not the joint ones, your pension, your brokerage. "You know," I said, "never." Margaret's shoulders released a fraction of an inch, a tell she probably did not know she had. "Good. Then here is what I can tell you right now before I pull a single document." She leaned forward slightly, her elbows on the desk. "A joint account means both parties have equal legal access. Whatever Brenda and Kyle did with the household checking, that is a problem, and we will deal with it. But your pension, your brokerage account, and the deed to your house." She paused. "They cannot touch those. They may not even know what they are dealing with." Something in my chest unclenched, not fully, but enough to breathe. "They think they have more than they do." That is my initial read, yes. Margaret reached for a second folder thicker than the legal pad and opened it on her desk. Her handwriting was on the tab. Then she looked up at me and her voice shifted into something quieter. "Walter, there is something else I need to tell you. Something that requires a little context first." She held my gaze steadily. "Carol came to see me 14 months before she passed. She sat in the chair you are sitting in right now, my throat locked, my hands resting on my knees, pressed down hard against the fabric of my trousers. She never told me that," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "She asked me not to tell you," Margaret said, "unless you walked through that door on your own." She held the folder but did not open it yet. She said, and I am quoting her exactly because I wrote it down the day she left, she said, "If Walter ever needs this, he'll find his way here himself. He doesn't ask for help until he's already half solved the problem. That's just how he's built." Margaret's eyes were steady on mine. "She knew you, Walter." My eyes burned. I pressed my back teeth together and breathed through my nose and stared at a point just above Margaret's left shoulder until the burning eased. Carol had been gone 4 years, and she was still the smartest person I had ever known. The knowledge of that sat in my chest, like a stone-heavy, permanent, oddly comforting. "What's in the folder?" I asked, when I could trust my voice again. Margaret placed her hand flat on the cover. Before I show you, I need to ask you one more thing. 3 years ago, did something happen with Kyle financially? Something significant. The question landed like a structural test probing for the exact load point. My jaw set. My hands gripped my knees, and I understood that Margaret, as usual, already knew which question to ask before I had figured out how to answer it. Yes, I said. There was something. Margaret's pen was still. Her legal pad sat to the side, untouched. She had stopped writing the moment I said yes, and now she was watching me with the particular stillness of someone who had learned that the most important things people say come out sideways in pieces when you give them enough room. 3 years ago, I said. November. Kyle came to the house on a Tuesday evening. I remembered it clearly, the way I remember anything that costs me. Brenda had called that afternoon to say Kyle needed to talk to me about something important, and could they come for dinner. I had made pot roast because Carol's recipe was the only thing I knew how to make. That felt like a real meal. They arrived at 6. Kyle had barely touched his food. He said they were going to lose the house. I continued. He had made some investments that didn't work out. He owed money to 3 different places, and one of them was talking about a lien. Brenda was sitting beside him at my kitchen table, and she was crying. Not the kind of crying that is meant to move you, but the kind that happens when someone is genuinely frightened. That is a difference I know how to read. How much did he ask for? Margaret said. He didn't ask for a number at first. He asked if I could help. I asked how much help. He said $47,000. I let that sit for a moment. I did not say yes right away. I asked him to explain exactly what the money would be used for. He said mortgage arrears, the lien, and a credit line he had let go too long. He had documentation. He showed it to me. Margaret's eyebrow moved a fraction. He brought documentation, a folder, printed statements. I checked the numbers myself. I paused. I am an engineer, Margaret. I do not approve anything without checking the load calculations first. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but close. What did you decide? I decided I was going to help my daughter keep her house, I said. But I was not going to do it the way most people do in families, on a handshake and a promise that everyone forgets about in 6 months. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a folded square of paper encased in a plastic document sleeve. I had put it there that morning before I left the house, the same way I used to fold inspection reports into my chest pocket on job sites. I placed it on Margaret's desk. I called Dennis Calloway before Kyle and Brenda left that evening. He lives 4 houses down. He's been my closest friend for 20 years. I asked him to come over. Margaret picked up the document sleeve carefully and held it to the light. Through the plastic, the handwriting was visible, 2 columns of date figures and 3 signatures at the bottom. A promissory note, she said. Written by hand, which is fully enforceable in Tennessee, as long as it contains the essential terms, the amount, the repayment conditions, the date, and the signatures of both the borrower and at least one witness. I had looked this up when I wrote it, and again 2 months ago when I started the notebook. Dennis signed as witness. I kept the original. Kyle took a copy. And the repayment terms, 6 months, I said. My voice stayed even, but my chest tightened like a cable under tension. He has not paid back $1. Not in 36 months. Margaret set the sleeve down and wrote something on her legal pad. Then she looked up. Did you ever discuss repayment with him directly? 3 times in the first year. Each time Brenda called me afterward, and said I was making things stressful for their marriage and could I please be patient. My jaw worked. The fourth time I brought it up, Kyle laughed. Not meanly, just easily, like it was a joke between us that I hadn't understood yet. After that, I stopped asking. I pressed my palms flat on my knees. I want to be clear about something, Margaret. I did not stop asking because I forgot. I stopped asking because I understood that asking wasn't going to produce a result, and I needed to decide what I was going to do about that. And 2 months ago, you started the notebook. 2 months ago, I confirmed. I started noticing other things, transactions on the joint household account that I did not make, online logins at hours I was asleep, small amounts 200 here, 400 there, consistent enough to be a pattern, inconsistent enough to look like normal household variation if you weren't looking for it. I tapped the notebook on the edge of her desk. I was looking for it. Margaret wrote 3 more lines, then set her pen down with a small click that felt in the quiet of her office like a period at the end of a sentence. Walter, she said. Dennis still lives 4 houses down. He does. And this promissory note, does he know you still have it? He knows, I said. We had coffee 2 weeks ago. I told him I might need him at some point. He said. I stopped. The memory pressed against the back of my throat, warm and solid, the way real friendship feels when you've had it long enough to trust it completely. He said, I signed my name to that paper. That means I go where the paper goes. Margaret looked at the document sleeve for a long moment. Then she reached for the second folder on her desk, the one with Carol's handwriting on the tab, and placed her hand flat on the cover. Her expression shifted into something I could not quite name. Not pity. Closer to the particular weight that comes from knowing something important about someone that they do not yet know about themselves. There is something Carol left with me, she said. She was very specific about when I should show it to you. She looked at me steadily. I think that time is now. Margaret opened the folder the way you open something that matters, slowly, without drama, with both hands. The first page was a legal document 12 pages long, printed on heavy cream stock with a notary seal on the last page. I recognized the format immediately. I had signed enough contracts in 35 years of engineering work to know what a trust document looked like. But seeing Carol's name on the cover line, Carol Ann Doyle Granter, sent a shock through my chest, so sharp I had to grip the armrest of the chair. This is an irrevocable trust, Margaret said. In Tennessee law, an irrevocable trust is a legal arrangement where the person who creates it, in this case Carol, permanently transfers ownership of specific assets to a trustee to be held and managed for the benefit of a named individual. She paused. The named individual is you, Walter. Solely you. Brenda's name does not appear anywhere in this document. I turned to the second page. Carol's signature was at the bottom, notarized and witnessed, dated 12 years ago, 4 months after Brenda and Kyle's wedding. My hands were trembling. Not violently, a fine, persistent tremor, the kind that comes not from fear, but from the body registering something the mind has not finished processing. I pressed the page flat against the folder to steady it. She did this right after the wedding, I said. It was not a question. 3 months and 11 days after, Margaret said. She came in alone. She was very composed. She told me she hoped she was wrong about certain things, but that she had learned in her life that hoping and planning were 2 separate activities, and that sensible people did not confuse them. A sound came out of me, not a laugh, not quite. Something between the two. Because that was Carol in a single sentence. That was exactly her voice, her logic, her refusal to let love make her careless. She wanted me to have this and not know about it, I said. She wanted you to have it and not need it, Margaret said gently. Those were her exact words. She said if you never walked through my door, that meant things had worked out. And if you did, Margaret touched the edge of the folder, then you would understand why she had done it. My eyes burned with a heat I had not felt in 4 years. I stared at Carol's signature on the second page. Her handwriting familiar as my own face in a mirror, the slight leftward tilt she had never corrected, because she said it was the one imperfect thing about her she had decided to keep. My throat closed around everything I wanted to say to her and could not. My chest ached with a grief so layered and so old that I could not have said any more where love ended and loss began. There is a second matter, Margaret said, and her voice was carefully neutral, the voice of a professional delivering information she knew would land hard. The life insurance policy, $180,000. The beneficiary on file when the policy was issued was you. Yes, I said. 8 weeks before Carol passed, a change of beneficiary form was submitted to the insurance company. The requested change was from your name to Brenda's. The burning in my eyes stopped. Something colder moved in to replace it. The insurance company rejected the form. Margaret continued. Under Tennessee law, when a policyholder is under active palliative care, which Carol was, any changes to a life insurance policy require written certification from the attending physician confirming the policyholder has full legal capacity to make the decision. That certification was never provided. The form was rejected and filed. The original beneficiary, you remained on record. I set the folder down on the desk because my hands had begun shaking too badly to hold it. Not the fine tremor from before. A real shake, the kind that starts in the center of the chest and works outward. She was on morphine, I said. The last 8 weeks she was on morphine around the clock. Yes, Margaret said. Brenda put a form in front of her mother. My voice broke on the last word, cracked right down the middle, and I did not try to stop it. While she was on morphine, Margaret did not offer comfort. She understood the way good professionals understand that there are moments when comfort is an intrusion. She simply waited while I got myself back, which took longer than I would have liked, and not as long as I feared. When I could speak again, I asked, did Carol know about the form? I believe she suspected something was being attempted, Margaret said. Which is why she called me 14 months before she passed rather than waiting. She said, and I wrote this down word for word, she said, I want everything locked before I'm too tired to lock it. Margaret held my gaze. She was not too tired, Walter. She got everything locked. I looked at Carol's signature one more time. That slight leftward tilt. The one imperfect thing she had decided to keep. Yeah, she always was smarter than me, I said, and my voice was rough with everything I was holding back. Margaret closed the folder with both hands. She loved you, she said simply, and she planned accordingly. Outside the window of Margaret's second-floor office, Gay Street moved through its ordinary Monday afternoon. A delivery truck. 2 women with coffee cups. A man walking a golden retriever who stopped to sniff a fire hydrant with the focused dedication of someone conducting a serious investigation. I watched all of it and understood, sitting in that chair, that Carol had been fighting for me long after she stopped being able to fight for herself, and that the least I could do, the absolute minimum I owed her, was to finish what she had started. What do we do next? I asked. Margaret was already reaching for her phone. Margaret reached her phone at the same moment I reached for my jacket. We shook hands at the door, firm the way people shake hands when they have just agreed to do something that matters, and she told me she would have a list of next steps by morning. I drove home on autopilot, the way you drive roads you have taken 10,000 times your hands, knowing the turns before your mind does. The house on Sutherland Court looked exactly the way I had left it 6 hours earlier. The front porch light was on. I had stopped turning it off after Carol passed, because coming home to a dark house felt like arriving somewhere nobody expected you. Inside the kitchen smelled like the coffee I had brewed at 6 that morning. 2 mugs on the counter. I had made 2 again without thinking, the way I had done every day for 4 years, the way I suspected I would keep doing, until my hands finally learned what my mind already knew. I poured the cold coffee down the drain, both cups, and stood at the sink looking out at the backyard. Carol's tomato cages were still out there. Rusted wire frames standing in the empty garden bed, holding the shape of something that was no longer growing. I had told myself every spring that I would take them down. Every spring I left them standing. I went to my desk. The bank statements were in the bottom filing drawer, organized by month the way I organized everything. Because disorder is how things fail quietly over time, and I had spent 35 years making sure things did not fail quietly on my watch. I pulled out 18 months of records and spread them across the desk in chronological order, 3 rows of 6, the way I used to lay out inspection reports before a project review. The first time I had gone through these 2 months ago, I had found 11 transactions I could not immediately account for. Tonight, knowing what I now knew about the online logins and about Kyle's plans, I went through them again with a different eye. 23 transactions over 18 months that did not match any bill I paid, any store I shopped at, any service I used. Amounts between $200 and $800. Always round numbers, 200, 350, 500. Always within the last week of the month when account balances were lowest and a withdrawal was least likely to stand out against normal bill activity. Always to the same receiving account, a routing number I did not recognize. I wrote each one down in a fresh column in the notebook. Date. Amount. Receiving account, last 4 digits. Then I added them up. $9,450. I set the pen down and pressed my fingers against my eyes hard enough to see light. $9,000. In small amounts over a year and a half, timed to be invisible. Not the behavior of someone who had made an error. The behavior of someone who had thought about how not to get caught. My phone buzzed at 9:47. I looked at the screen. Brenda. I let it ring through to voicemail without touching it, the way you leave a structural crack uninvestigated until you have the right tools. Not because you are ignoring it, but because you are not ready to open that wall yet. I checked the online banking portal next. Scrolling through the login history in the account settings, a feature most people never look at, buried under 3 layers of menus. 14 logins from a device that was not my desktop computer, spread across 6 months. All of them between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. All of them on nights I had gone to bed before 10, which was most nights, since my knees started making their opinions known about the stairs. I sat back in my chair. The desk lamp made a small, warm circle in the dark room, and outside the window, the Sutherland Court neighborhood was perfectly quiet. No traffic, no voices, just the sound of October doing what October does in East Tennessee. That was when my phone rang a second time. Not Brenda. A different number one I recognized with a warmth that cut straight through the cold arithmetic of the evening. Hey, Grandpa. Lily's voice bright and a little breathless, the way she always sounded when she called, like she had been running toward the conversation from 2 rooms away. Did you eat dinner? My chest loosened in a way I had not expected. Lily called me every evening around this time, had started doing it 2 years ago after Carol died, without anyone asking her to. She was 14 then. She is 16 now, and she has not missed a week. I was just about to, I said, which was not entirely true. Grandpa, that means no. She made a sound of theatrical disappointment that made me want to smile despite everything. There's leftover chicken in the freezer from Sunday. I put it there myself. You have to eat real food or your blood pressure does the thing. The thing, I repeated. You know what the thing is. Dr. Hendricks told you what the thing is. He did, I agreed. How was school? She launched into a story about her history teacher and a debate about the Tennessee Valley Authority that had apparently gotten heated enough to require the teacher to separate two students. I half listened and half watched the 23 transaction amounts lined up in my notebook, and somewhere in the middle of Lily describing how her friend Marcus had argued that the TVA was actually a net positive for regional development in the 1940s, she said something that stopped me cold. Oh, Mom came by your house last week, by the way. Tuesday night, I think she said she was helping you with some bills. I kept my voice completely even. Did she mention what time? Late. I was already in bed. She came home after midnight. A pause. Is that okay? She said you asked her to. I looked at the login history on my screen. Tuesday night, 11:43 p.m., device ID unknown. Of course, I said. You know your mom, she likes to help? After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, my thumb pressed against the warm screen. Lily had not called to give me information. She had called because she calls every evening because she is 16 years old and she loves her grandfather, and she has no idea that the thing she just told me in passing was the last piece I needed to understand exactly what had been happening in my house while I slept. I picked up the pen, wrote the date and time of the login in the notebook, drew a line connecting it to the Tuesday entry in the transaction column. Then I stood up, put on my coat, and walked 4 houses down the street. Dennis Calloway answered the door before I knocked. He was holding a coffee mug in one hand and wearing the flannel shirt he always wore when he was not expecting company, which meant he had been awake for a while and had not bothered to change. He took one look at my face and stepped back from the door without a word, which is the thing about 20 years of friendship. Sometimes the invitation is in the stepping back. Sit down, he said, jerking his head toward the kitchen. I just made a fresh pot. Dennis's kitchen smelled like dark roast and wood smoke from the fireplace in the next room. His wife Martha's plants lined the windowsill. She had been gone 3 years now, and Dennis still watered them every morning because, as he had once told me, stopping felt like telling her she had been wrong to care about them. I understood that logic completely. He set a mug in front of me, sat down across the table, looked at me with the steady brown eyes of a man who had worked 30 years in insurance claims and had developed through that work an absolute radar for when someone was telling him the shape of a story rather than the whole story. Start from the beginning, he said. All of it. So I did. I told him about the card at CVS and Kyle's voice saying I get confused sometimes, and I watched Dennis's jaw tighten the way it does when he is angry but has decided not to be angry out loud yet. I told him about Margaret's office and the trust Carol had built 12 years ago and the insurance form Brenda had put in front of Carol while she was on morphine. Dennis set his mug down at that point, set it down harder than he meant to so that coffee sloshed up the inside rim, and said low and rough, Lord above Walter. There's more, I said. Of course there is. He pulled the mug back and wrapped both hands around it. Go ahead. I told him about the 23 transactions and the late-night logins and what Lily had said on the phone, without knowing she was saying anything important. Dennis listened to all of it without interrupting, which was not his natural state. Dennis was a man who interrupted with purpose, who asked questions mid-sentence when something needed clarifying. The fact that he did not interrupt told me he was storing everything up for something. When I finished, he stood up and went to the counter. He pulled open the second drawer from the left. The junk drawer, the one Martha had organized into color-coded sections, that Dennis had maintained out of pure stubbornness, and took out a folded piece of paper. He came back to the table and smoothed it out between us. It was a printout. Numbers, names, account notations. I recognized the format as a credit report summary. "My son works for a credit monitoring company in Nashville," Dennis said. "He ran across this about a month ago and called me because he recognized Brenda's name." He tapped the page. "I have been waiting to know whether to show you." I looked at the total at the bottom of the page. $83,240. Credit cards, a personal loan, and a business loan from something called Volunteer State Small Business Lending. The business name listed was a nail salon on Kingston Pike that, according to a note Dennis's son had added in pen at the bottom, had been closed for 8 months. "She never told me about any of this," I said. My voice came out flat, emptied of the outrage I would have expected to feel. Instead, there was something else, a kind of tired clarity, the feeling you get when a load calculation finally confirms what you already suspected, and there is no longer any point in hoping you were wrong. "She wouldn't," Dennis said. "You'd have tried to help her, and then you'd have known." I nodded slowly. "She needed the money, but she couldn't ask me directly, because asking would have meant explaining, and explaining would have meant I'd find out about all of it." I pressed my thumb against the edge of the table hard. "So instead of asking, she took." That's how I read it. Dennis's voice was not without compassion, but it was not soft either. "Walter, there's one more thing." He leaned forward and rested his forearms on the table, and something in his posture shifted, not heavier exactly, but more deliberate. The way a man leans in when he is about to say something he has been carrying too long. "Carol called me, about 6 weeks before she passed." The coffee mug in my hands suddenly felt very heavy. "She called my cell phone," Dennis continued, "on a Thursday afternoon when I know for a fact Brenda was at the house with her. She sounded careful, controlled, like she was talking around something because she couldn't talk straight at it." He met my eyes. "She asked me to bring you over, just you, without calling Brenda first." "Did you?" My voice came out rough, scraped thin. "I tried." Dennis's face tightened with something that looked like old guilt, the kind that does not ease with time. "I drove over that Saturday. Brenda met me at the door. Said Carol was resting and couldn't have visitors." His jaw worked. "I drove over the following Wednesday. Same thing. Different excuse, same result." He shook his head slowly. "I should have pushed harder, Walter. I have thought about that every week since. I should have walked past her and knocked on Carol's door myself." My eyes burned. I pressed my back teeth together until the burning steadied into something I could hold. Carol had been trying to reach me. 6 weeks before she died, with whatever energy she had left, she had picked up a phone and tried to get to me. And someone had stood between us. "She knew," I said. The words came out barely above a whisper. "She was trying to tell me and she couldn't get through." "No," Dennis said. "She couldn't." He reached across the table and gripped my forearm once firmly, the way men of our generation express the things they do not have easy language for. "But she found another way, didn't she?" It was not a question. It was the truest thing anyone had said to me in 4 years. I straightened in my chair, squared my shoulders the way I used to square them on job sites when the day was long and the work was not done. "I need to call my son," I said. "James. I haven't really talked to him in a long time." Dennis nodded. He refilled my coffee without asking. Outside his kitchen window, the October sky was going gray with the first suggestion of morning, and somewhere down Sutherland Court a dog was barking at something only it could see. "Make the call," Dennis said. "I'll be here when you need me." I walked home from Dennis's house as the sun was coming up over the ridge behind Sutherland Court, turning the October sky the particular shade of orange that Carol used to call Tennessee gold. She had a name for every color of sky over this city. I had never paid enough attention to learn them all, and now there was nobody left to ask. Inside, I made coffee 1 cup this time deliberately, with the specific intention of making only one, and sat down at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me. The notebook was open to the page where I had written James's name 2 weeks ago, with a question mark beside it. I had known for 2 weeks that I needed to make this call. I had found reasons not to every day since. The reasons were Brenda's work patient and systematic, laid down over years. "She's just going to stress you out, Dad. James has his own life now. You know how he gets." Small sentences delivered casually that had accumulated into a wall I had not noticed being built until I was standing on one side of it and my son was on the other. I picked up the phone and dialed before I could locate another reason not to. 4 rings. I was composing a voicemail in my head when the line opened. "Dad." James's voice was the careful of someone who does not receive midday calls from his father and has already begun to prepare for the reason. "Is everything okay?" "Not entirely," I said. "I need to talk to you about some things that have been happening here. I should have called sooner." A beat of silence. Then, "Did Brenda call you?" The question landed oddly. "No," I said. "Why would Brenda call me?" "I see. She called me about 3 weeks ago," James said slowly, like a man picking his way across uncertain ground. "She said you were having some trouble keeping track of things, that you'd been mixing up appointments, forgetting whether you'd paid bills. She said it might be better if I held off visiting for a while so you could," I think the phrase she used was, "get stabilized." My hand tightened around the phone until the knuckles ached. Get stabilized. As though I were a structure that had shifted off its foundation and needed to be jacked back into place before anyone came to inspect it. "James," I said, and I kept my voice the way I kept my voice on job sites when a situation was serious and panic would cost more than it solved. "I want you to listen to me carefully. I have not missed a single appointment in 3 years. I have not forgotten a bill payment since 1987. I am sitting at my kitchen table right now with 18 months of bank statements organized in chronological order, and I can tell you the exact amount and date of every single transaction in that stack." A breath on the other end. "Dad, I need to ask you something," I said. "The last time you sent me money, birthday, Christmas, whatever it was, what account did you send it to?" The pause that followed had a different quality than the ones before, something shifting in it. "I have it saved in my banking app," James said. "Hold on." The sound of tapping. Then he read me a 9-digit routing number and a 16-digit account number. I looked at the top statement on the stack in front of me. My account number was printed in the upper right corner. The last 6 digits did not match what James had just read me. Not even close. "James," I said, "that is not my account number." The silence that came back was not a pause. It was a wall coming down. "What?" His voice dropped into something low and tight that I had not heard from him since he was 17 years old and had just understood that something he believed was not true. "Dad, I sent money for your birthday in June. I sent money at Christmas. I sent money when you had the knee thing in February." "I didn't receive any of it," I said. "I want you to understand that I am not angry with you. I am telling you this because you deserve to know, and because I need you to hear it from me directly, rather than from someone else's version of events. How long? His voice cracked on the second word, just slightly like a hairline fracture. How long has this been going on? Based on what I can verify, at least 3 years. 3. He stopped. Started again. Dad. Who changed my account information? I think you already know the answer to that, I said quietly. Another silence, this one full, rather than empty, the silence of a man rapidly reassembling everything he thought he knew about the past 3 years into a shape he does not recognize. I waited. I had learned from Carol that waiting was sometimes the most useful thing you could offer someone. I'm coming home, James said. His voice had changed again, steadier now, the way voices get when shock passes through anger and comes out the other side as resolve. I'll leave within the hour. I can be there by 4. You don't have to, Dad. The single word carried everything he could not say in front of it. I'll be there by 4. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a while without moving, the phone warm in my hand. Through this kitchen window, Carol's tomato cages caught the mid-morning light and threw thin, rust-colored shadows across the garden bed. I thought about all the Tuesday evenings James had not called, all the Christmases he had driven to Knoxville, and the visits had been short and slightly stiff in the way visits get when two people have been told enough small untruths about each other that they stop knowing how to be comfortable together. 3 years. My son had been trying to reach me for 3 years in every way he knew how, and someone had been quietly redirecting everything he sent. I stood up, rinsed my coffee cup, and placed it in the drying rack. Then I went to the spare bedroom and made up the bed with clean sheets. Carol's good sheets, the blue ones she saved for company she actually wanted to keep. James pulled into the driveway at 4:17 in the afternoon, 12 minutes later than he had promised, which told me he had driven hard the whole way from Nashville and still hit traffic on I-40 coming through the Cumberland Gap corridor. He drove a dark blue pickup, newer than mine, and he sat in it for almost 2 full minutes after the engine went off before he got out. I watched from the front window. I did not go to the door. He needed those 2 minutes, and I understood that the way I had understood sitting in the CVS parking lot 2 days ago, that some arrivals require a moment of preparation before you can walk through what comes next. When he came up the porch steps, I opened the door before he could knock. We stood there looking at each other across the threshold. My son, 46 years old, wearing a gray work jacket, and 3 days of stubble that told me he had not been sleeping particularly well before I called him, and me, 72, standing in the doorway of the house he had grown up in. James's eyes were red around the rims. Not from crying, from the particular strain of 4 hours of driving while your mind is running faster than the road. "Hey, Dad," he said, and his voice broke open on the second word, cracked right down the center, and he stepped forward and put his arms around me the way he had not done since the morning after Carol's funeral, when we had stood in this same doorway and held on to each other because there was nothing else to hold on to. My throat locked. My chest ached with something so old and so layered that I could not have named it cleanly, grief and relief and 4 years of distance collapsing all at once. I put my hand on the back of his head, the way I had when he was small, when he was sick, when the world had been too much for him and I was the thing between him and it. "Come inside," I said when I could trust my voice. "I'll put coffee on." He sat at the kitchen table, his old chair, the one he had always chosen, without being assigned it, the one closest to the window, and I made coffee, and we let the kitchen settle around us for a few minutes before either of us spoke. Outside, the afternoon light was going gold across the backyard. "Show me the statements," he said finally. Not a request. A man getting down to work. I laid the 18 months of records out across the table the way I had the night before, 3 rows chronological order. James pulled the stack closest to him and started at the top, moving through pages with the focus of someone who does not miss things. He had been an operations manager for 11 years. He knew what financial irregularity looked like. It took him 4 minutes to find the first one. "This transaction," he said, tapping the page with his index finger. $250 last Thursday of September, 14 months ago. "What's this routing number?" "Not one I recognize," I said. "That's one of 23. His jaw tightened. He kept moving through the stack. Found the second. The third. By the time he reached the 7th, his breathing had changed, slower, more deliberate, the breathing of a man keeping himself under control by paying very close attention to the numbers in front of him. Then he reached the savings account summary. He stopped. "Dad." His voice was very controlled. "Open your banking app. Go to your savings account. Read me the full account number." I read it to him. He picked up his own phone, scrolled. His face went rigid in a way I had never seen on it before, a kind of cold fury that was so unfamiliar on my son's features that it took me a moment to recognize what I was looking at. "That's my app," he said. "My saved transfer recipient labeled Dad's Savings." He turned the phone and held the screen toward me. The account number saved under my name in his app was not my account number. The routing number was different. Both numbers were ones I had seen before in the transaction records on the receiving end of 23 withdrawals. He put the phone face down on the table because his hand was shaking too badly to hold it steady. "She went into my phone," he said. His voice had dropped to something just above a whisper, rough at the edges. 2 Thanksgivings ago, I left it on her kitchen counter when I was helping carry groceries in. I was outside for maybe 15 minutes. His jaw tightened. 15 minutes was enough. She changed the saved recipient numbers so that every time I sent you money, it went to her instead. He pressed his fist against the table surface, not hard enough to make a sound, but hard enough that I could see the effort it cost him to keep the rest of it contained. "For 3 years, Dad. Every birthday. Every Christmas. I thought you were getting it. I thought you didn't need it. I didn't know you were sending it," I said. "I want you to hear that clearly." He looked up. His eyes were bright with something that was not going to become tears, but wanted to. "Did you think I just stopped? Did you think I stopped caring about whether you were okay?" The question hit me somewhere deep and painful, the place where 3 years of quietly wondering had settled. "Brenda told me you were busy," I said. "That you had a new life in Nashville, and you didn't need the old one pulling at you." He made a sound, not a word, something lower than a word, the sound a man makes when the shape of a lie becomes completely clear to him all at once. He stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen window and stood there with his back to me, his shoulders rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. "So she told me," he said, to the window, to the garden, to Carol's rusted tomato cages standing in the October light, "that you found my visits stressful, that you were happier when things were quieter, that she said I was making your grief worse by coming around too much." I stared at my son's back, at the set of his shoulders, at the way his hands were pressed flat against the window frame on either side, holding himself steady. "I never said that," I said. "Not once. Not to anyone." He turned around. His face had settled into something that was past anger, past the hot part of it, into the cold part that lasts. "Neither did I," he said. "Not one word of what she told you came from me." We looked at each other across the kitchen, that Carol had painted yellow in 2003 because she said kitchens should feel like morning even at night. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on Sutherland Court. My son and I stood in the house we had both loved and understood, perhaps for the first time in 3 years, that the distance between us had never been ours. "Stay as long as you need to," I said. James nodded. He pulled out the chair and sat back down and picked up the next page of statements. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." James worked through the rest of the statements, while I heated up the leftover chicken Lily had put in my freezer the Sunday before. He did not stop reading while I moved around the kitchen, did not look up when the microwave beeped, did not acknowledge the bowl I set beside his elbow, except to shift the papers slightly to make room for it. That was my son. When he was working, he was working. Carol used to say he had gotten that from me, and she did not always mean it as a compliment. We ate at the table with the statements spread around us, like a map of somewhere neither of us had wanted to go. "She's been doing this for at least 3 years, James said between bites. "Probably longer on some of it. The pattern in the household account goes back further than your records." "I only pulled 18 months, I said. "I can go back further." "We should." He set down his fork and looked at the page in front of him. "Dad, this isn't disorganized. This isn't impulsive. Whoever set this up understood how to move money in amounts that don't trigger automatic flags. Under $1,000 per transaction, irregular intervals, different days of the week." He tapped the page. "This is patient. This took planning." The word patient landed in my chest like a cold weight. Because I knew Brenda. I had watched her grow from a girl who sat on my shoulders at the Tennessee State Fair to a woman who planned a business and ran it for 2 years before it failed. Patient was the right word. Brenda had always been patient when she wanted something badly enough. "She needed money," I said. "And she didn't ask." James looked up. "Why do you think she didn't ask?" I thought about that, honestly, the way I had been thinking about everything since Monday morning, without the comfortable shortcuts that love makes available. "Because asking would have meant explaining," I said. "And explaining would have meant I found out about Kyle, about the debt, about all of it." I pressed my palms flat on the table. She knew I would have helped her. That's the part that tears at me, James. I would have given her money if she'd come to me and told me the truth. I have always helped my children. James's jaw worked. He looked down at his bowl. When he spoke, his voice was careful in the way that means the careless version would be too much. "She took that away from you," he said. "Not just the money. The chance to be the father you wanted to be." I did not answer that. I did not need to. James understood he had always been the one who understood the things I did not say. The way Carol had understood them, that particular frequency of silence that meant I had heard something true and did not yet know what to do with it. We cleaned up together the way we always had. James washing me, drying, no discussion about who did which, because we had established those roles when he was 11 years old, and they had simply never changed. Carol's cardinal dish towel was on the rack beside the sink. James picked it up to dry his hands after he finished, and looked at it for a long moment. "She gave me this," he said, "for Mother's Day, 2009. "I know," I said. He hung it back carefully exactly where it had been. Neither of us said anything after that, but the kitchen felt different than it had an hour before. Less empty, the way rooms feel when the right people are in them. We moved to the living room. James took the armchair by the window, not Kyle's chair, the other one, the one James had always claimed on visits home. I settled on the couch. The lamp made a warm circle in the October darkness. "Tell me what she said about me," I said. "Exactly. Everything you can remember." James leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and told me. All of it. That I found his visits draining. That I had told Brenda I wished James would call less because it reminded me too much of Carol and made the grief harder. That I had apparently said at some point that James's life in Nashville had become more important to him than family, and that I had accepted that even if it hurt. Small, specific, plausible lies, the kind that work because they contain just enough truth about grief and distance and the way grown children sometimes drift, that you believe them without realizing you are believing anything at all. When he finished, I told him what Brenda had told me. That James was building something in Nashville and did not need the weight of home pulling at him. That he called infrequently because he preferred it that way. That she had once said with a sad smile that I had taken for genuine grief, "Dad, I think James just needs space from all the memories here. We have to respect that." James stared at the carpet between his feet. His hands were laced together so tightly that his knuckles had gone pale. "She said that to you," he said. Not a question. A man confirming the coordinates of something. "She did," I said. He looked up. "Dad, I drove to Knoxville 4 times in the past 2 years. 3 of those times Brenda called me the week before to tell me you were tired and it wasn't a good time. The 4th time I came anyway, and you seemed..." He hesitated. "You seemed distant, like you were being careful with me." "I was," I said, "because Brenda had told me the week before that you'd mentioned finding these visits obligatory." I watched my son's face move through something complicated and painful. "I was trying not to make you feel obligated." James made the sound again, that low, wordless sound that meant the shape of a lie had become completely clear. He stood up from the armchair and crossed to the window and stood there with his back to me for a moment, breathing. "3 years," he said to the dark glass. His voice cracked through the middle of it. "We lost 3 years, Dad. Just gone. Because she kept redirecting everything we sent each other." "Not gone," I said. He turned around. "We're here now. And we know the truth now, which is more than we knew a week ago." He looked at me for a long moment. My son standing in the living room of the house he grew up in, 46 years old, and shaken in a way I had not seen since Carol's funeral. Then he nodded once, came back to the armchair, sat down. "Okay," he said. "What do we do next?" I opened my mouth to answer. My phone buzzed on the end table. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number, a text message. I picked it up. The message contained 6 photographs, blurry and slightly tilted, taken in low light from a phone held at an awkward downward angle. Every single photograph contained my name. At the bottom of the message, below the photos, 4 words, "I don't know what this means," before I reveal what arrived on my phone at 2 in the morning and changed everything, drop a number in the comments. "Just type 10 so I know you're still here with me. I need to know who's listening before I show you what Lily found. Note, what follows contains some fictionalized details for storytelling. If that's not for you, this is a good place to step away. No hard feelings." I enlarged the first photograph. My name printed in standard legal font across the top of what appeared to be a formation document, the kind filed with the state when establishing a business entity. Below my name, in a section labeled Property Address, was the street address of my house on Sutherland Court. Below that, in a section labeled Managing Member, was a name I did not recognize, Doyle Property Management, LLC. James was out of the armchair before I finished looking at the second photo. He crossed to the couch in 4 steps and sat beside me close enough to see the screen, and I watched his expression move from alert to taut to something harder and colder than I had seen on his face all evening. "Anna, that's a limited liability company formation document. He said, his voice sharp and steady the way voices get when operational training takes over from emotion. An LLC in the United States is a legal business structure that separates personal liability from business liability. It can own property, enter contracts, and take on debt all under the business name, rather than the individuals. Someone filed this with the Tennessee Secretary of State. He swiped to the next photo. This is a deed of trust application. They were preparing to use your house as collateral on a loan. He swiped again. And this? He stopped. What? I said. This is a signature page. He held the phone closer to the lamp. Dad, is that your signature? I looked. The signature on the page had my name, Walter R. Doyle, written in a hand that was close enough to mine to pass a quick look, but not close enough to pass the look of someone who had signed his name to 35 years of engineering documents and knew exactly how he formed every letter. No, I said. My voice came out very flat and very certain. That is not my signature. James set the phone down on the cushion between us and pressed both hands against his knees. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscle working in his cheek. They were going to forge your signature, he said, on a deed of trust, to borrow against your house through a shell company with your name on it. I called the unknown number. It rang once. Then Lily's voice came through, not her usual bright, running toward the conversation voice. This was smaller, tighter, the voice of a girl who had done something she was not sure was right and was sitting in the dark waiting to find out. Grandpa. A breath. I'm really sorry if I did something wrong. I didn't know who else to. Lily. I kept my voice gentle, the way you keep a hand gentle when something is frightened, and you do not want to make it worse. You did not do anything wrong. I promise you. Tell me where you found these. She exhaled a long, shaky breath that told me she had been holding it for a while. I couldn't sleep, she said. I went to get water like an hour ago and Dad's office light was on, which was weird because he goes to bed at 10 usually. But the door was open a little, so I looked in and he wasn't there. He must have just left the light on. And there were papers all over his desk. Her voice tightened. Grandpa, your name was on every single one. Like everywhere. I didn't understand what they said, but it felt wrong. It felt really wrong. So I took pictures. I pressed my free hand flat against my knee to keep it steady. My heart was hammering in a way since the morning I got the call about Carol, but my voice stayed level because Lily needed it to. That was the right thing to do, I said. You did exactly right. What does it mean? Her voice went smaller. Is something bad happening? Something is being sorted out, I said. That's all you need to know right now. Lily, did your father know you were in his office? No. I went straight back to my room. I've been sitting here for an hour trying to decide if I should send them to you. I am very glad you did. I paused. Does your mother know you called me? No. A beat. Grandpa, are you okay? The question hit me somewhere between the sternum and the throat. My 16-year-old granddaughter, sitting alone in her room in the dark, photographs of documents she did not understand on her phone, asking me if I was okay. The love in that question, the pure, unguarded worry of it, tightened my chest until I had to breathe carefully around it. I'm going to be fine, I said. I need you to do something for me. Go to sleep. Don't mention to your parents that you called me. Can you do that? Yes, she said, then very quietly. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, sweetheart, I said. More than you know. After I hung up, James and I sat side by side on the couch in the lamplight. He picked up the phone again and went through all 6 photos slowly, methodically, the way a man goes through evidence when he is building something in his head. Doyle Property Management, LLC, he said. They put your name on the company, your name on the house collateral, your forged signature on the transfer documents. He set the phone down. Dad, this wasn't opportunistic. This was constructed, step by step, over months. The guardianship angle with the doctor, the forged signature, the LLC, it's a sequence. Each piece sets up the next one. I looked at the phone on the cushion between us. 6 photographs taken by a 16-year-old girl who had gone to get a glass of water at 2 in the morning and followed her instincts in the dark. Call Margaret, James said. Right now. Tonight. I picked up the phone. Outside Sutherland Court was perfectly quiet. Somewhere in a house 12 minutes away, my granddaughter was lying in her bed in the dark, and I understood with complete clarity that whatever happened next, she had already done the bravest thing in this entire story. I found Margaret's number and pressed call. Margaret answered on the second ring. I did not apologize for calling at 2 in the morning. She had told me years ago that serious matters did not observe business hours, and neither did she. I walked her through the 6 photographs while James held the phone so we could both see the screen. When I finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds. Forward me all 6 images right now, she said. I'll have a filing ready by 7. What kind of filing? The kind that makes it significantly more expensive for anyone to touch your house before a court date. Her voice tightened. Walter, this is no longer a family dispute about household spending. This is a coordinated attempt to acquire your property through fraudulent documentation. Get some sleep. I'll call you at 7. I did not get much sleep. I lay on Carol's side of the bed, the side I had slept on since she passed, and watched the clock move from 2:40 to 3:15 to 4:08. Somewhere in those hours, I must have drifted, because the next thing I knew, the bedroom was gray with early light and my phone was ringing. The screen said, E.D. Hendricks. My doctor of 15 years never called before 8 o'clock. Walter. His voice was careful, deliberate. I need to tell you about a call my office received yesterday. Dr. Edward Hendricks had practiced family medicine in Knoxville for 26 years. He was 63, lean the way men are when they run half marathons and mean it. And he had a manner that was direct without being cold. He had sat with me through every appointment since Carol's diagnosis. He knew my blood pressure, my cholesterol, my left knee, and more relevantly, he knew my mind. Someone called identifying himself as your son-in-law, he said. He described memory difficulties, missed appointments, confusion about finances, difficulty following conversations. A beat. He asked me to write a letter documenting cognitive decline consistent with early dementia. My hand tightened on the phone until the plastic creaked. In the doorway, James appeared still in yesterday's clothes, watching my face. He asked you to document something that does not exist, I said. No, that is my professional assessment. Dr. Hendricks's voice was dry in the way that covered something angrier underneath. Walter, your Montreal Cognitive Assessment score in August was 29 out of 30 top percentile for your age group. You have not missed a single appointment in 15 years. A pause. I declined the request within 30 seconds. But you needed to know it was made. What does a letter like that get used for? James called from the doorway. A documented cognitive decline assessment is typically the first step in pursuing a legal guardianship petition, Dr. Hendricks said. In Tennessee, a petitioner must demonstrate the individual lacks capacity to make responsible decisions. A letter from the person's own physician carries significant weight in that process. James's face went very still. Ed, I said, I need something from you. Already writing it, he said. Formal letter clinic letterhead confirming you are of sound mind and fully capable of managing your own affairs. His voice lost its professional finish. Walter, I have been your doctor for 15 years. Whoever is doing this picked the wrong patient. At 9 o'clock, Margaret met us at Tennessee Valley Bank on Kingston Pike. Sandra Park, the branch manager, had silver-streaked hair and the unhurried precision of someone who understood that speed and accuracy were not the same thing. She verified my identity through 3 separate processes before touching a single document. Mr. Doyle, she said, I want to walk you through exactly what we're changing and why. She explained each step clearly. In Tennessee, a joint account holder may grant secondary access to a third party, a family member, to manage transactions on their behalf. That access can be revoked at any time by either primary account holder. She was revoking every authorization carrying Brenda's name across the household, checking and joint savings accounts. My individual accounts pension brokerage had never carried secondary access and required only updated security protocols. Sandra addressed me directly throughout. She did not glance at James in the way people do when they are quietly questioning whether the older man in the room is following along. When it was done, she slid a summary document across the desk. Processing completes tomorrow afternoon. Any attempt to access using previous authorizations will be declined and flagged. We shook hands and walked out into the Thursday morning sunshine on Kingston Pike. I stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the October sky, blue and sharp, the kind that feels like a clean page. They're going to call, James said. They already are, I said. My phone had buzzed 4 times during the meeting. I had not looked at it once. Let them. By 5 that afternoon, the missed calls numbered 22. Brenda. Kyle. Brenda again. The pattern of people who had expected a door to open and were becoming alarmed that it had not. James set the phone down. They found out. Yeah, I said. He looked at me. Are you ready for what comes next? I thought about the notebook I had kept for 8 weeks, about Carol's trust in Margaret's office, about Dr. Hendricks writing a letter on clinic letterhead that morning, about Lily's photographs, about Dennis 4 houses down who had signed his name to a piece of paper 3 years ago and had never once suggested he might not still stand behind it. I have been ready, I said, for 8 weeks. Margaret called at 7:30 Friday morning, which meant she had been in her office for at least an hour already, which meant what she had found was worth getting there early for. James drove. I sat in the passenger seat of his truck and watched Kingston Pike move past the window, the CVS where this had started 4 days ago, the dry cleaner Carol had used for 20 years, the diner where Dennis and I had breakfast every other Saturday. 4 days. It felt like a different calendar entirely. Margaret was standing when we walked in, which I had come to understand was her signal that the information she was about to deliver required the room to be prepared for it. She waited until we were both seated, then laid 3 documents on the desk in a row, evenly spaced, the way you lay out evidence when you want someone to see the sequence rather than just the individual pieces. I'm going to show you these in order, she said, because the order matters. The first document was a printout of a civil court record from Fulton County, Georgia, dated 6 years ago. Margaret tapped the top line. Kyle was named as a defendant in a civil action brought by his older brother regarding the management of their parents' estate following their father's death. She paused. His parents are both still living. His mother subsequently pursued a separate restraining order which was granted. Kyle has had no legal contact with either parent since. I looked at the document. At Kyle's name in the defendant column. At the case summary which described the unauthorized transfer of estate funds into accounts Kyle controlled, and a secondary allegation involving a power of attorney document that the court found had been obtained under circumstances that raised questions about the elder Mr. Kyle's capacity at the time of signing. "He has done this before," James said. His voice was flat, certain. "Cried sir." "He has a documented pattern," Margaret said, which was the lawyer's version of the same thing. His own family recognized it and pursued legal remedy. He moved to Tennessee, met Brenda, and found a new situation. She moved to the second document. "This is the complete LLC formation filing, registered 8 months ago with the Tennessee Secretary of State. Managing member listed as Kyle, using your home address as the business address." I leaned forward and read the company purpose as Filed Property Acquisition and Management Services. Acquisition, not management, not maintenance. Acquisition. "He named it after me," I said. "Doyle Property Management," Margaret confirmed. "Yes. In Tennessee, using a person's name in a business entity without their consent is not automatically illegal, but using their forged signature on documents filed under that entity's name is a separate matter entirely, and a serious one." She moved to the third document. This one was different from the others, not a court record or a filing, but a printed email chain. 2 pages. The header showed an email address I did not recognize sending to a Knoxville real estate brokerage. "My assistant found this through a property record search," Margaret said. "The email address is registered to Kyle. The brokerage confirmed the inquiry when I called them this morning." She gave me a moment to read the first paragraph. The email asked about current market valuations for residential properties in the West Hills neighborhood of Knoxville, and specifically about the process for listing a property when the owner of record was. And here Kyle had written the phrase with the casual confidence of someone who expected it to simply be accepted, transitioning out of independent living capacity. Transitioning out of independent living capacity. The house I had designed, the house I had built with my own hands and Carol's beside mine. The house where my children had grown up and where Carol had died in the bedroom at the end of the hall with her hand in mine. Transitioning out of independent living capacity. James's hand came down on the armrest of his chair hard. "When was this sent?" 3 weeks before Kyle called Dr. Hendricks," Margaret said. The sequence clicked into place the way a load calculation clicks when all the variables finally resolve. Doctor's letter first established cognitive decline on paper. Then guardianship petition transfer legal decision-making authority away from me. Then the LLC and the deed of trust, borrow against the house under business cover. Then the sale. Step by step. Patient. Exactly the word James had used 2 nights ago at the kitchen table. "What do we do with this?" I said. Margaret gathered the 3 documents into a single neat stack. "We take it to court," she said. "I filed for a temporary restraining order on the joint savings account this morning at 7 o'clock. That protects the immediate cash." She looked at me steadily. "The hearing for that order will be scheduled within the week. And Walter, when we walk into that courtroom, I want you to understand something." "Tell me," I said. "We are not walking in with suspicions," she said. "We are walking in with a Georgia court record, a forged signature, a fraudulent LLC filing a real estate inquiry, dated 3 weeks before a fabricated medical request, and 6 photographs taken at 2 in the morning by a 16-year-old girl who followed her instincts." She placed her hand flat on the stack. "We are walking in with a case." Outside, the Friday morning traffic on Gay Street moved through its ordinary rhythms. I sat in Margaret's office and thought about bridges, about the ones I had built, the ones I had inspected, the ones that were still standing 40 years after I had signed my name to their structural plans. You built them right, or you built them wrong. There was no middle ground that held weight over time. Then let's go to court, I said. Dennis Calloway had hosted a fall cookout in his backyard every October for 19 years. The first year Carol and I attended, she had brought her cornbread and spent the better part of an hour arguing with Martha about whether it needed jalapenos. Martha made it without. Carol made it with. They argued about it every October after that cheerfully and without resolution, and when Martha passed 3 years ago, Carol had cried harder than I expected and said, "Walter, I am going to miss fighting with that woman every single year." 6 months later, Carol was gone too, and Dennis and I had sat in his kitchen after the funeral, and neither of us had touched the cornbread on the counter. This year I brought store-bought rolls because I did not trust myself to cook anything that mattered and get the proportions right. James drove. He had offered to skip the gathering entirely. "Dad, you don't have to do this today." And I had told him that was exactly why I had to do it. Because the alternative was sitting in the house on Sutherland Court, watching the phone ring with calls I was not going to answer, and I had spent enough of this week doing things on other people's terms. Dennis's backyard looked the way it always looked in October: portable heaters in the corners, folding tables covered in checkered cloth, the smell of wood smoke and chili drifting from the big pot Martha's sister had taken over, making 3 years ago, and had not quite gotten right yet, though nobody said so. College football played on the outdoor television mounted above the garage door. Roughly 20 people moved between the tables and the food and the heaters. The comfortable circulation of neighbors who had known each other long enough to run out of small talk and move into something easier. People noticed me immediately. Not all of them, but enough. 3 separate conversations paused in the way conversations pause when someone walks in that people have been discussing in their absence. I had expected that. I had not expected how much it would feel like walking across a job site where you know the ground has been disturbed, but you do not yet know where. Dennis met me at the gate with a coffee mug and a handshake that lasted slightly longer than a normal handshake. "Glad you came," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "Had to," I said. He nodded. He understood that without needing it explained. James stayed close, but not attached close enough to reach, if I needed him far enough away to let me stand on my own ground. I moved through the gathering the way I had always moved through job site meetings, when the news was not good deliberately, without hurrying, making eye contact, and meaning it. Brenda and Kyle arrived 40 minutes after we did. I watched them come through the gate from across the yard. Kyle walked the way he always walked, in public, shoulders back, easy smile, the physical vocabulary of a man who had never once doubted his welcome. He was wearing a barn jacket I had not seen before, which meant he had bought it recently, which meant the financial picture he presented to the world was still running several chapters ahead of the one in Dennis's son's credit report. Brenda walked beside him with her eyes doing a quick scan of the yard, and when they found me, her expression did something complicated that she controlled almost immediately. Almost. I raised my coffee mug slightly. She looked away. Within 20 minutes, I began hearing pieces of conversations that confirmed Brenda had been busy in the days since Monday. A neighbor named Phil, who had lived 3 houses down for 12 years, and whose opinion I had generally respected, found a moment beside the food table to say quietly and with genuine concern in his voice that he had heard things had been difficult lately, and that he hoped I was taking care of myself. The way he said it, careful, specific, in no particular detail, generically worried, told me he had heard a version of events that had been shaped before it reached him. "I'm taking excellent care of myself," I told him. "Probably better than I have in years." He nodded and looked slightly uncertain, which told me my answer did not match the picture he had been given. Kyle found a loose cluster of people near one of the heaters and began talking. I could hear piece of it from where I stood, something about challenges that came with aging parents, something about financial complexity. Something about the difficulty of watching someone you loved struggle with changes they could not fully understand. His voice was warm and measured and genuinely convincing in the way that only practiced delivery can be, and I watched three people nodding along with the expressions of people absorbing a reasonable concern rather than a manufactured one. Dennis appeared at my elbow. His jaw was set. "How long has he been working this neighborhood?" I said. "At least 2 weeks," Dennis said. "Phil called me last Thursday to ask if I thought you were really having trouble keeping track of things." He looked across the yard at Kyle. "I told Phil what I knew. I don't think it landed." Kyle was still talking. His hands moved with the easy expressiveness of a natural storyteller. One of the women in the group touched her chest sympathetically. Dennis set his mug down on the nearest table. He rolled his shoulders once the way a man rolls his shoulders when he is about to do something he has made peace with doing. "Excuse me," he said, and walked toward the group around Kyle. He did not raise his voice. He did not make an announcement. He simply walked into the edge of the conversation, as though he had a natural right to be there, which in his own backyard he did, and waited for the next pause. "Kyle," he said in the pleasant tone of a man making an observation rather than an accusation, "I was thinking about something the other day. 3 years ago November. Do you remember coming over to Walter's house on a Tuesday evening?" Kyle's expression shifted by approximately 1 millimeter. "Sure," he said easily. "We had dinner." "We did," Dennis agreed. "Pot roast, Carol's recipe." He let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. "You also signed a promissory note at the kitchen table for $47,000. I signed it as a witness." He looked around the small group with the mild, factual expression of a man reporting the weather. "I was curious how's the repayment going on that—" The question landed in the group like a structural load that the floor had not been designed for. 3 years of easy social confidence drained from Kyle's face in the time it takes a traffic light to change. His mouth opened, closed. "That's," he started. "I have the date written down," Dennis said pleasantly. "November 14th, 7 p.m. The total was $47,000 repayable in 6 months. He tilted his head slightly. "It's been 36 months, Kyle. I'm genuinely asking." The group around the heater had gone very still. Phil looked at Kyle, then at Dennis, then at me. Kyle's jaw tightened. His eyes moved to Brenda, who was standing 8 feet away with a plate she had stopped pretending to eat from. She gave him nothing, no rescue, no signal, just a look that I had not seen on my daughter's face before, a look that fell somewhere between frozen and cracking. "That's a private family matter," Kyle said finally, and the confidence in his voice had been replaced by something that was trying to sound like dignity and not quite making it. "No, it was," Dennis said. "Right up until you started telling people Walter couldn't manage his own affairs." He picked up his mug. "I thought the neighborhood ought to have a little more information." The backyard did not erupt. It simply went quiet in the particular way that outdoor spaces go quiet when something real has been said in them. The ambient noise of conversation and football commentary still running underneath, but the human attention pulling away from all of it and toward the thing that actually mattered. Kyle straightened his shoulders and looked at me across the yard, and I walked toward him because standing across the space from each other was not a conversation. It was a performance, and I was done performing. "Walter," he said as I came within speaking distance. His voice had recovered some of its steadiness. "I know this looks—" "Tell me specifically," I said, "which part of my situation you're concerned about." He blinked. "Dad, we're just trying to help." "I am not your father," I said, not harshly, simply correctly. You are married to my daughter. That is a different relationship, and it comes with different standing. I looked at him steadily. Now, I have built 14 bridges in this estate with my name on the load calculations. I managed our household finances for 35 years without one overdraft. I have a pension, a paid-off house, and a brokerage account I have been maintaining since 1994. I paused. Tell me specifically which of those things you believe I am no longer capable of handling. Kyle opened his mouth, closed it. Brenda stepped forward from beside him. Her voice pulled tight. Dad, this isn't the place. You made it the place, I said. When you started talking to this neighborhood about my cognitive health, you made every backyard in a 2-mile radius the place. I looked at my daughter 6 years old, on my shoulders at the state fair, gap-toothed and laughing, and I felt something in my chest that was simultaneously grief and fury and love so old it had no clean edges left. Brenda, I need you to be my daughter, not my financial manager. Those are 2 separate jobs, and for the past 2 years, you have been doing the wrong one. Brenda's face moved. The calculation in it dropped away for just a moment, replaced by something raw and younger and genuinely hurt. Her eyes went bright. Her chin trembled once before she controlled it. Dad, I know what you were trying to do, I said. I have the bank statements. I have the login history. I have photographs of the documents on Kyle's desk. I watched the color leave her face as I said it to him, watched the understanding move through her eyes that the ground she had been standing on was not as solid as she had believed. I also know about the nail salon, about the credit cards, about the $83,000. Her breath caught audibly. I would have helped you, Brenda, if you had come to me and told me the truth. I have always helped my children. That is who I am. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled, and this time the tears spilled before she could stop them, and I genuinely could not tell, standing there looking at my daughter, whether they were real or whether they were the last available tool. That uncertainty was the sharpest pain of the entire week. Not the forged signature, not the LLC, not the doctor's letter. The fact that I was standing in front of my own child, and I could not read her face anymore. Dennis stepped into the space beside me. He was not looking at Brenda. He was looking at Kyle. There is also, Dennis said in the same pleasant conversational tone he had used at the heater, the matter of a civil case in Fulton County, Georgia, 6 years ago. He let Kyle process the name of the county, watched Kyle's throat move as he swallowed. Your brother filed it. Your parents supported it. He raised his eyebrows mildly. Anything you'd like to say about that to the neighborhood? Kyle said nothing. The silence from him was not the silence of a man thinking. It was the silence of a man who had run out of moves and knew it. James appeared at my right shoulder, steady and close. On the far edge of the gathering near the back fence, where the heater light did not quite reach. Lily stood with her arms crossed over her chest, watching. She had not spoken. She had not moved toward her parents. She simply stood there with her eyes on me, and when I looked at her, she did not look away. I looked back at Kyle. 3 years ago, you sat at my kitchen table and I lent you $47,000 because my daughter was frightened, and I loved her. My voice stayed even. It cost me something to keep it even, but I kept it. I wrote a promissory note because I am an engineer, and I do not approve expenditures without documentation. I kept a copy because I keep everything. I looked at him one final time. I also wrote you a letter of recommendation 12 years ago when you needed a job and had no one else to ask. You have had every decent thing I had to offer you, Kyle. You chose to take the rest without asking. Kyle's barn jacket suddenly looked like what it was, a costume. He looked at Brenda. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the ground, at her shoes, at something that was not in that backyard at all. Lily unfolded her arms. She walked across the yard toward me, past her parents without looking at either of them, and stopped beside me. She did not speak. She reached out and took hold of my arm, not dramatically. Not for the room, just a 16-year-old girl holding on to her grandfather in a backyard in October, because it was the truest thing she knew how to do. I put my hand over hers. Phil looked at Kyle, then at Dennis, then at me. He set down his chili bowl and said very quietly, "I think I owe you an apology, Walter." "You believed what you were told," I said. "That's not something to apologize for." Dennis raised his coffee mug an inch in my direction. I nodded back. The football game continued on the television above the garage. Somewhere at the far table, someone laughed at something entirely unrelated to any of this, the way life keeps running its ordinary current underneath everything that tries to interrupt it. James drove us home from Dennis's backyard, in the kind of quiet that is not uncomfortable, the quiet of two people who have been through something together and do not need to immediately process it out loud. The October dark had settled fully over Knoxville by the time we turned onto Sutherland Court, and the porch light I always left on made the house look from the street like a place where someone was expected. "You all right?" James said, pulling into the driveway. "I will be," I said, which was honest. I was not entirely all right yet, but I could see the direction of it. Inside, James heated up the rest of the soup from the freezer without being asked, and set a bowl in front of me at the kitchen table, and we ate without talking much, because the day had used up most of our words. After he washed the bowls and I dried them, and he rehung the cardinal dish towel exactly where it belonged, and said goodnight and went down the hall to his room. I stood in the kitchen for a while after he left. The house was quiet in the way houses get late at night. Not empty, just resting. I thought about Lily standing in the backyard with her arms crossed, watching and then walking across the grass to take hold of my arm. She had not said anything. She had not needed to. 16 years old, and she had understood instinctively and completely that the truest thing available to her in that moment was just to stand beside me. Carol would have loved that about her. I went to Carol's writing desk. It was in the small sitting room off the hallway, a room Carol had claimed as hers early in our marriage, and which I had never had any real use for except to walk through on my way to somewhere else. The desk was cherry wood, narrow, with 3 drawers on the right side, and a surface that Carol had kept clear except for a small lamp, a ceramic cardinal she had bought at a craft fair in Gatlinburg in 2011, and a photograph of the two of us taken at James's college graduation. In the photograph, Carol was laughing at something I had said, which was she always maintained the best documentation of our marriage in existence. I had not opened the bottom drawer since she passed. The top 2 I had gone through with Brenda in the weeks after the funeral: stationery stamps, a broken pen Carol had been meaning to throw away for years, some greeting cards she had saved. The bottom drawer Carol had always called the waiting drawer. For things that could wait, she said. I had accepted that without asking what was waiting or for what. I pulled the chair out and sat down. Opened the bottom drawer. Inside was Carol's jewelry box, the small wooden one her mother had given her, painted blue, with a tarnished brass clasp. I lifted it out and set it on the desk. Beneath it, at the bottom of the drawer, was a white envelope sealed with my name written on the front in Carol's handwriting. Below my name, in smaller letters, she had written, "When you're ready." My hands went completely still. I do not know how long I sat there holding it. Long enough for the lamp to feel very warm and the room very quiet, and the ceramic cardinal on the desk corner to seem in the way that inanimate things sometimes seem when you are alone with them late at night, like it was paying attention. I opened the envelope, 2 pages both sides. Carol's handwriting smaller toward the end of the second page. The letters closer together, the way handwriting gets when someone is tired, but determined to finish. She had written it the way she talked to me when something mattered most directly, without ornament, with the particular combination of love and practicality that had been the foundation of everything between us for 38 years. She told me she was sorry she could not say it in person. She told me she hoped she was wrong about Brenda, and that if I was reading this, then she had not been wrong, and that she was sorry about that too, because she had loved Brenda fiercely even when Brenda made it difficult, which was, she wrote, the particular tax that parents pay on having children who are fully human. She told me about the trust that Margaret had the papers, that everything was locked, that she had spent 3 months making certain there was nothing left unlocked before she let herself stop worrying about it. She told me she had tried to reach me through Dennis and had not been able to get through, and that she needed me to know she had tried. She told me the house was mine and always had been and would remain so, and that 38 years of building something together meant the structure was sound even after one of the builders was gone. And near the end of the second page in handwriting, that was smaller and closer than the rest, she had written, "Walter, you spent 35 years making sure the weight didn't bring things down. You know how to hold. Don't forget that." I set the letter down on the desk and pressed both hands flat against the cherry wood and breathed. My eyes burned so badly I could not see the ceramic cardinal for a full minute. I did not try to stop it. Carol had written me a letter, and she had been right about everything, and she had tried to reach me and been stopped, and I had not known any of it. And now I knew all of it. And the grief of that not new grief, not separate from the grief I had been carrying for 4 years, but layered into it beneath it, the oldest stratum pressed against the inside of my chest with a weight I had not felt since the morning she was gone. I breathed through it. The way you breathe through the hard part of a structural inspection, when what you find is what you feared. Not because the breathing changes what is there, but because clarity requires air. When I could see again, I reached back into the jewelry box and found the small spiral notebook beneath Carol's rings and the pearl earrings she wore to every occasion that required pearl earrings. 31 pages, her handwriting dated entries going back 18 months before she passed. Not a diary. A record dates, account inquiries, documents she had been asked to sign, questions Brenda had asked about the pension and the brokerage and the trust. The last entry was 3 days before she died. The handwriting was unsteady but legible, and the last line read, "Walter always kept receipts." I hope he kept ours. I closed the notebook, set it beside the letter, sat with both of them in front of me for a long time. Then I picked up the photograph from the corner of the desk. Carol laughing at James's graduation, the best documentation of our marriage, and held it until I felt steady. Set it back, took the letter and the notebook, and folded them together, and placed them in the inside pocket of my jacket, the chest pocket where I had always kept the folded blueprints on inspection, days close to the body where they would not be lost. Thursday was 6 days away. I turned off the lamp, went to bed, lay in the dark, listening to the October quiet of Sutherland Court, and for the first time since Monday morning, I slept without waking until the alarm. Courtrooms are quieter than people expect. No swelling music, no dramatic entrances. Mostly the sound of papers being organized, a door opening and closing somewhere down the hall, the occasional cough from the gallery, and the particular compressed silence that settles when everyone in a room understands that something is about to be decided, and the deciding will be permanent. I had been in courtrooms twice in my career, both times as an expert witness on structural load capacity called to testify about bridge designs in liability disputes. I knew how to sit still in a hard chair and wait for the right question without filling the waiting with anything unnecessary. Margaret sat to my left. James sat behind me in the first row of the gallery with Lily beside him. She had called that morning and asked to come, and James had driven past her school to pick her up on the way. She was still in her school clothes backpack under the seat. I had not told her to stay away. Dennis had driven up separately and was already seated 2 rows back when we arrived, wearing his good flannel shirt and a tie that I suspected Martha had bought him sometime before 2019, and which he had kept in rotation ever since, as a mark of respect for occasions that required one. Brenda and Kyle were at the opposing table with their attorney, a man named Garrett, who had the careful, slightly harried look of someone who had reviewed the case file the previous evening and found it considerably more complicated than his client had represented. Kyle sat with his back straight and his hands folded on the table, performing composure with the effort of a man who was working hard at it. Brenda sat beside him with her eyes on the surface of the table in front of her, and she did not look up when I came in. Judge Eleanor Marsh entered at 9:02. She was in her mid-60s, silver-haired, with the unhurried authority of someone who had presided over enough family disputes to have developed a reliable internal compass for which direction the truth was pointing, before the first witness opened their mouth. Everyone rose. She settled, looked at both tables with the even attention of someone taking inventory, and said, "Be seated. Let's begin." Margaret presented our case the way she did everything methodically, without theater building the structure piece by piece, so that the weight of it was unmistakable before the final beam went in. She walked Judge Marsh through the timeline, the declined card at CVS, the online account access from unknown devices between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. over 6 months, the 23 unauthorized transactions totaling more than $9,000, the contact with Dr. Hendricks requesting a fraudulent cognitive assessment letter, the LLC formation, using my home address, and a forged version of my signature, the real estate inquiry, about selling my property. She presented each piece of evidence as she described it. The printed account statements, the login history, Dr. Hendricks's letter confirming my cognitive health, the Georgia Civil Court record, the LLC formation document, the real estate email, the 6 photographs Lily had taken at 2 in the morning with her phone held at a downward angle in the low light of Kyle's office. Judge Marsh read without comment, her expression consistent throughout. Not cold, not sympathetic, simply attentive in the way that serious work requires. Then Margaret reached into the folder and produced the letter and the notebook. "Your Honor," she said, "these were authored by Walter Doyle's late wife, Carol Doyle, in the final months of her life. The letter has been authenticated by a forensic handwriting specialist. The notebook contains dated entries consistent with the activity documented in the financial records." She placed them before the clerk. Mrs. Doyle understood what was happening. She documented it, and she made certain her husband would have what he needed when he needed it. Judge Marsh picked up the letter, read the first page, read the second, set it down and looked at me directly for the first time. She held my gaze for a moment, not challenging, not pitying, simply looking the way someone looks when they are making an honest assessment, and then she turned to the opposing table. "Mr. Kyle," she said. He stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "3 years ago, did Walter Doyle lend you $47,000? His attorney touched his arm briefly. Kyle said, "Yes." "Have you repaid it?" A pause of 3 full seconds. "Not yet." "Did you contact Dr. Edward Hendricks requesting a letter documenting cognitive decline in your father-in-law?" Another pause. "Yes." "Whose idea was that?" The courtroom held its breath. Kyle's hands folded on the table in front of him, tightened against each other until the knuckles went pale. "It was my idea," he said, Judge Marsh wrote something on her pad. She did not react to the answer beyond the writing of it, which was, I had come to understand in the past hour, her method. She received information without performing a response to it, which was more unsettling to the people providing it than any theatrical reaction could have been. One more question, she said. She looked at Kyle over the top of her reading glasses with an expression that was entirely neutral, and somehow, because of that neutrality, more penetrating than accusation. The LLC registered 8 months ago Doyle Property Management, using Mr. Doyle's home address and what appears to be a facsimile of his signature. Did you prepare those documents? Kyle's attorney was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. The question of document authenticity has not been counsel. Judge Marsh did not raise her voice. She simply said the word, and the attorney sat back down. She looked at Kyle again. Did you prepare those documents? Kyle looked at Brenda. Brenda was looking at the table. I was involved in preparing them, Kyle said. Judge Marsh set her pen down. She looked at both tables for a moment, then at the gallery, then back at her notes. When she spoke, her voice carried the particular weight of someone who has reached the end of the deliberation and is now delivering what it produced. Citater, the temporary restraining order protecting Mr. Doyle's separate property and financial accounts is hereby extended pending full hearing, she said. The joint savings account shall remain frozen. No party shall interfere with assets legally belonging to Mr. Doyle. She signed 3 documents in succession, each signature deliberate and unhurried. I am also referring the matter of the LLC documentation to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential fraud. That referral does not constitute a finding, it is a procedural step. She looked over her glasses one final time. Court is adjourned. In the hallway outside, the ordinary life of a Thursday morning courthouse moved around us clerks with file folders, a young couple waiting on a bench, a janitor pushing a cart with a squeaky wheel. Margaret put her briefcase strap over her shoulder and looked at me. You held together well in there, she said. I had good material to work with, I said. She almost smiled. Then she said, It's not over. The full hearing will be scheduled and there may be the district attorney's review to navigate. But today, she paused. Today went the right direction. I looked down the hallway toward the exit where the Thursday morning light was coming through the glass doors in long flat rectangles across the floor. James was beside me. Dennis was 2 steps behind, loosening the tie Martha had bought him. Behind us, from inside the courtroom, I heard Brenda's voice, low, strained, saying something to Kyle that I could not make out. And Kyle's voice responding shorter, tighter, and then a door opening and closing. I kept walking toward the light. The hallway outside courtroom 4 smelled like floor wax and recycled air. Margaret walked beside me toward the elevator briefcase strap over one shoulder heels, making a clean, unhurried sound on the tile. James was on my other side. Dennis was 2 steps behind, working Martha's tie loose with the relief of a man ready to return to flannel. We were almost to the elevator when a woman in a dark blazer stepped into our path legal pad against her chest. Mr. Doyle, I'm with the district attorney's office. She paused. I wanted to ask whether you'd pursue formal charges under Tennessee's Adult Protection Act. Financial exploitation of an elderly adult is a Class C felony, a serious criminal offense, carrying up to 6 years in Tennessee. Given today's evidence, we'd have a strong foundation. I looked at her. Then I looked down the hallway. Lily was standing near the courtroom door with James's jacket over her shoulders, backpack still on both straps. She had come straight from school. She was watching me with the steady eyes of someone who had taken photographs at 2 a.m, sat through an entire week of school without telling her parents a word, and walked across Dennis's backyard in October to take hold of my arm in front of everyone. She was 16 years old, and Brenda was her mother. That was not going to change, regardless of what I said in this hallway. "No," I said. "Mr. Doyle, the charges available, I understand them completely." I looked at the woman steadily. "Brenda is my daughter. She is also the mother of that girl standing at the end of this hallway. Lily is going to need her mother to be reachable." My answer is no. The woman nodded. "The LLC fraud referral is separate. That's between the DA and Kyle directly. That one isn't yours to decline." "I understand," I said. We got in the elevator. Margaret said nothing until the doors closed. Then, "That was your call, and you made it clearly." She looked straight ahead. "Carol would have done the same." I felt the letter in my inside jacket pocket and thought she was right. 3 weeks after the hearing, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. The screen said, "Kyle." I let it ring twice, not deciding whether to answer, just making sure I knew who I was going to be when I did. Walter. His voice was different. Flat. Stripped of every layer of social confidence I had ever heard in it. He sounded like a man sitting alone in a room with nothing left to perform for. I needed the money. I didn't know how to ask. So I did what I did. A pause, the pause of someone who rehearsed a sentence and is discovering that saying it out loud is harder than rehearsing it. That was wrong. Outside the front window, Sutherland Court was moving through its ordinary Tuesday evening. A neighbor walking a dog. A car turning into a driveway. "I hear you," I said. Another pause. That's all I called to say. The line went quiet. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while after. Then I set it on the end table, screen up, and did not delete the contact. Lily's birthday was in April. She would want to be able to reach her father. Some things mattered more than being right, and I had known that long enough to act on it. December came quietly to Knoxville the way December does when you are no longer dreading it. Cold, but not punishing the kind of cold that makes the porch light look warmer than usual when you come home at the end of the day. I had finally taken down Carol's tomato cages the week before. The wire had been rusting since the last summer she planted anything, and I had left them standing for 4 years because taking them down felt like finishing something I was not ready to finish. But wire that rusts should be used, or let go. And I had ordered seeds for spring beefsteak, Carol's preference, and 1 row of cherry tomatoes because Lily had mentioned she liked them better, and I had learned to plan around who was actually going to be there. On a Saturday morning in December, I drove to CVS on Maple Grove Road. Same parking spot. 3rd row center. Same doors. Same artificial lavender smell. Same pharmacy counter. A different pharmacist, this time reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, who found my prescription without any trouble. I pulled out my debit card and inserted it into the reader. The screen blinked green. Approved. I picked up the paper bag and turned toward the exit. James was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a man who had driven 4 hours from Nashville on a Saturday morning and did not need to explain it to anyone. Lily was beside him, backpack on both straps, hair still wet from swim practice. She saw me pushed off the wall, crossed the pharmacy floor in 6 quick steps, and reached out and took the paper bag from my hand before I could say a word. She held it against her chest with both arms, the way you hold something you intend to keep safe. "Got it," she said. I walked through it into the December morning. The sky was the pale blue that only comes in winter, and the maples along Maple Grove Road had gone bare weeks ago, their branches clean and exact against the cold. They had done what they always did, and they would do it again in spring, long after any of this was anything more than a story someone told about an October that changed everything. The 3 of us walked to the truck. Lily climbed in the back seat, still holding the bag, and launched into a full account of her swim meet and a butterfly personal record that she clearly felt had not yet received adequate recognition. James asked the right questions. I drove. Carol used to say the strongest structures were not the ones that had never been tested. They were the ones that got tested, held, and were still standing when the people who needed them finally showed up. She was talking about bridges. She was talking about me. I kept both hands on the wheel and headed home. Looking back now, I think about all the small moments I missed. The signs I explained away because explaining them away was easier than facing what they meant. If there is one thing this GrandPastries taught me, one thing I would go back and tell myself sitting in that CVS parking lot, it is this: do not wait until the door closes to understand it was being shut on you. I am not a man who asks for help easily. 35 years of engineering taught me that structures hold until they don't, and by the time they don't, it is often too late to do anything but document the failure. That was almost my story. A family revenge I never wanted, built quietly inside my own house by people I had loved without condition. Do not be like me. Talk to someone sooner. Keep your records. And trust the people who show up, not the ones who explain why others can't. I believe with everything I have left that God puts the right people in the right doorways at the right moment. Carol found her way to me through a letter in a drawer. Lily found her way to me through 6 photographs at 2 in the morning. That is not coincidence. That is grace. This revenge story is not one I chose, but it is one I survived. And if any part of it sounds familiar to you, if you have felt that quiet pressure, that slow erasure, then this GrandPastries was made for you. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you felt. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because the next story is waiting, and it will find you right where you are. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. The stories ahead contain fictional elements crafted for reflection and life lessons. If that is not what you are looking for today, that is perfectly all right. Step away and find what serves you best. No judgment here, only stories.